Well, today we announced the beneficiaries for the 2021 Santos GLNG Mayor's Charity Ball, and I'm very pleased to announce that the charities this year are Nullandu Health Services, Rosebery Community Services, Mindcare Gladstone, and of course our good friends at Zonta are back on again as beneficiaries. We've raised almost $400,000 over the years for the local charities in the community, and we're going to do our absolute best to raise as much as we can again this year. And thanks to our sponsors and of course those who turn up and buy the tickets, the money will be distributed right across the Gladstone region. Well, the ball this year, the theme is Starry Night, and it's on the 29th of May, and tickets are on sale on the 1st of March, so we're encouraging everyone to jump on Council's website or contact the team at the GECC. It's 4972 822 and make sure you don't miss out. It's always a fantastic night. Obviously, 450 tickets on sale, they will sell out, and we've got the fantastic Hamilton Band coming back from Brisbane. They were here for our New Year's Eve event a couple of years ago, so people will remember them from that. It's going to be fantastic. Don't miss out on getting your tickets for this event.
Illegal dumping and littering is a concern across the Gladstone region, with over 130...
Good morning and welcome to the Gladstone Regional Council General Meeting of Tuesday the 20th of April 2021. We'll kick the meeting off with apologies, and we do have an apology from Mayor Matt Burnett as the Vice President of the Australian Local Government Association. He's currently engaged in the CEO interviews for that organisation representing Central Queensland and Australia down there. So here's an apology. Can I get someone to move Councillor Branthwaite, seconded Councillor Trevor? All those in favour? Mayor Matt's apology be accepted. We'll move on to messages of condolence, and I know Councillor Churchill, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mr Chair. Try and make this as brief as possible, but it's with deep regret that I advise of the recent passing of a long-time resident and ratepayer, Max Henry Mine, at 88 years young, recently of Eureka Care Village. Most of us would know Max, but Max arrived here in Gladstone and the region in the early 1950s after being sworn in as a young police officer, and in 1952 on transfer for country duty to Gladstone and be at the Gladstone region. But he loved it so much, he married a local lady, raised a local family, built their family home on the Dawson Highway, contributed to the local economy and loved it so much that he never left. But like many others, when QAL was built in Gladstone in the mid-1960s, he secured a job offer with the security there at QAL, and it was too good to refuse. He resigned from the Queensland Police Force, as it was known then, after nearly 15 years, and served with QAL until he reached happy retirement. Max is very well known throughout the district in his role as a member of the Mount Larcombe RSL sub-branch, the Queensland Retired Police Association, the various bowls club, the museum, and his well-kept fishing crabbing club secret locations. In talking to Max only a few weeks ago, and it's very timely with Anzac Day approaching, which I'm sure you're going to touch on, Mr Chair, but with that approaching this Sunday, Max was very much looking forward to marching and raising the flag this year. So it's quite sad that he won't be able to do that. But like many others, Max was a former national serviceman, proudly, and prior to that was an Army Reserve officer. So just simply on behalf of the Gladstone Regional Council, sincere sympathies to his family and friends. Rest in peace. Thanks, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Do we have any other messages of condolence? No? We'll move on to prior notification of conflicts of interest. I don't think we've got any conflicts, councillors. Everyone's happy to move on. All right. Well, given the Mayor's not present today, we won't worry about the mayoral statement. So we'll move on to item number G/2.1, the confirmation of general minutes for the 6th of April. Can I get a mover to confirm those minutes? Move Councillor Churchill, seconding Councillor Hanson. All those in favour? That's carried. Item number G/3.1, monthly financial report for the period ending 28th of March 2021, and I'll hand over to General Manager for Finance, Governance and Risk, Mark Holmes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The monthly financial statements for essentially the end of March are attached for your consideration there. The key items to note within that are the adoption of essentially the revision of our forecast, which is a slight deterioration from our budgeted position with our operating deficit in around 5.2 million. The other significant items to note you'll see is that as our capital works program has got more in a view, and we've got some maturity in and around the forecasting with respect to that. We've seen that forecast of actual expenditure come down slightly, but almost in line with what your adopted budget is. So the forecast expenditure for the year is in around 65.1 million, as opposed to the $64 million budget. So very much in line with that at the moment. And you'll see that's contingent on there's still a large spend to occur in the last 3 months, but also you'll note that there's over $15 million worth of commitments there that we've got in the system with respect to expenditure on those works. The other more pleasing note with respect to our financials is the continued recovery of our outstanding rates, with our outstanding rates being certainly well below where we were this time last year. So attributed to two factors in my mind. That's essentially recommencement of our debt recovery process, so be more active in that space, engaging with the ratepayers who may be struggling with the repayment of rates and making sure that we're putting payment arrangements in place. And also just the general turnover of properties in the sector and in the region. So generally when we've got a high turnover of properties, and as you'll see that the outstanding rates will fall during those times, because when properties settle, rates are generally settled at that time. So that, I think that is absolutely contributing to that. Happy to take questions with respect to the report.
Questions to the General Manager? Councillor Hanson, did you have one?
Just a couple through you, Mr Chair. The $6.2 million fleet replacement program, I'm glad Rick's here today, he could probably answer this anyway. When's that expected to be complete? Is it going to be complete in the financial year? Through Mark, but to Rick, I guess.
Yeah, I guess certainly that's the current forecast in terms of the budget there. So I think there's certainly a number of items there and some very large items that are part of that. But there's also a significant rolling program that'll see that delivered during the period. So that is the forecast at the moment. There may be some small movements in that, but that's where we're expecting at this time.
Yeah, and another one on the capital. I think we said that the commitments, including commitments, the year-to-date capital is 38.5 and the commitments is 53.6.
Yep.
But you've only given us there's $6.2 million of other commitments that they're not stated here, I think.
Yeah, so
is that right? Or that might be the exact figure, so 6 million.
Yeah, so the amount of commitments, so yeah, $38 million worth of actual expend, $15 million worth of commitments in the system currently. So that's 53 million.
That's right.
Which is looking at then working through to that. So that's where we're at.
And thank you.
The reporting on that does change in terms of this, in terms of our fleet accruals. We pulled them out separately, just the way they accrue within our system. So we have included them for fullness in this report.
And are you confident that we can achieve that capital? You said that before, but are we very confident?
It will require a significant spend in those last 3 months. Yeah, we've got we're at $53 million including commitments at the moment. We've still got some significant spend to go to hit that.
And just one last one. Sorry, Glenn or Councillor Churchill. The asset sustainability ratio, 29.26 on renewables. That's all we're spending on renewables. The other percentage is
so we've got
the rest of the percentage is new projects. Is that right?
Yeah. So it depends on where. We did have a below average asset sustainability ratio forecast for this year, and that's because a large amount of our capital program, in terms of that 65 million, was actually on new or upgrade assets. You know, be it Phillip Street, be it our biosolids facility. So, being essentially they're excluded from that calculation. So that asset sustainability is the renewal spend on our assets divided by depreciation. So that is our current forecast. But then we've got to look at the longer term trend there.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind councillors with the budget coming up that it might not all be bright and shiny this year with new items. We may have to look a lot more at our asset management program and what we need to replace or renew. So
and
I think we've got to really look hard this time at that part of the budget. Yeah,
and you'll see that your long-term forecast predicts that.
Thanks, Mark.
Councillor Churchill, did you?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. I suppose Councillor Hanson, it's probably a segue because I've got probably a comment, clarification, and then a question. I do have some concerns in relation to that. I suppose the forecast budget and the likelihood of the deficit, but your report quite comprehensively explains aspects, but I'm comforted by the fact that you're indicating that we currently have a healthy position in relation to a large cash balance as it stands at the moment.
Yep.
So that's pleasing to read. That was the first one, more a comment than anything. The question I wanted to highlight in your report was in relation to, and bear with me, was on page 11, where you indicated 4,989 ratepayers have paid their rates in advance. That's fantastic, and it's pleasing. And I know we've discussed this before. How do we get more to do it? But my question for clarification is, do those 4,989 ratepayers who pay their rates in advance get the benefit of a discount?
Yes.
So that should be an encouragement to increase that.
Yeah, if they've paid their rates in full at that time, they would have absolutely received that. And
there is some level of...
Generally what we work towards is making sure that those ratepayers that are on those payment plans are working towards having their rates paid in full by the time rates become due the subsequent financial year. So for the 21-22 financial year, we'll be hoping that those people that are on a payment plan, so those 4,989 ratepayers, will have be able to receive the discount because they paid their rates in full.
Provided that it's all paid in advance on time.
Yep.
Okay, great.
So essentially that's the timing of to do with those payment plans.
And my final one is, and this might be a simple answer for you, it's a simple question, is on page 8, where you've indicated in there employee benefits are the largest component of council's recurrent expenditure. Rightfully, the increase in that forecast expenditure is primarily due to a vacancy rate of 5.1% within council, compared to the budgeted vacancy rate of 7.5%. And then your additional comment there was on historical trends. My question to you at this stage is, how do we compare with other local governments of our same size, and have we done some level of research perhaps in job shares? That might be something the CQ Rock's taking on, but my question predominantly at this stage is that how does that historical trend for Gladstone region compared to other local governments of the same size as ours?
We probably haven't done the work from a financial perspective, and I'm not sure that Tina online could answer the question from a people, culture and safety perspective, but certainly the 7.5% is what has been the long-term average in terms of a vacancy rate. So that has been our realised actual, so regardless of, from a budgeting perspective, that has been our realised result. I realise we may have aspirationals to whether to increase or decrease that, but from a prudent budget perspective, that was our realised experience. And so to me, it would be, if we were to budget at 100%, that's saying that you're going to have absolutely no vacancies at all, and we're going to fund each and every position, which is just not the case. So, as I said, we're in and around that 5.5% now. We actually been as low as 4% for very much the first 6 months of the year. What we've seen is in the last 3 months, and probably more as the general economy and region starts to recover from the COVID issues and close downs, is that people are getting more confident, and there's been a little bit more movement in the job market. So we've seen our vacancy rate creep up to around about 6% now. So month on month. So the long-term average is that 5% for the year, but the budget was based on a 5-year history.
But it also sends a message to me appropriately that people are being retained. People are being retained, and they're proud to work for us.
Absolutely. And
I'd be interested, perhaps in the future or a future report, be interested to know how we do comparatively to other local governments of our same size.
Yeah, and I think there is some benchmarking work that we'll be looking at doing with other councils and continuing to do, and this is just one of the stats we could add to that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Churchill, did you have a question, Councillor Brennan? No? Councillor Muscat?
Thank you and good morning. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, Mark. Thank you. When we look at let me just go up for a second. Capital expenditure. So that's in page 9. Now, I seem to remember that we were in a similar situation last time we had a report. Would it be fair to assume that this is due to, I guess, what we're going to be looking later on in the recommendations from the ARIC committee when it comes to open purchase orders and not being able to keep up with some of the payments that we are to be doing?
This is nothing to do with payments.
Nothing? Okay. Well, I'm just saying there's
with,
open purchase orders?
Yeah, so there is an open purchase. There is a component of that in terms of the receival of goods on time, and that should help. And what that should do is actually convert your commitments to actual in terms of that space. So at this stage, I'd say the large amount of those commitments are their commitments. They're not sitting there as unpaid invoices. They are commitments.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just reading the rest of the agenda, and there's a few notes about unpaid or open purchase orders that haven't been processed. So I was just wondering if it was connected to this.
Yeah, and that's about making sure that our field staff who've received the purchase, who've raised the purchase orders, have received those. So there's an action that they need to take, and there is, and we're working actively between the finance team and our contracts procurement team, and indeed our operations team, more broadly, making sure that people are receiving for those items as and when they fall due to correct that issue.
Great, thank you. Now, the next question, it's in relation to road assets. I should put my glasses on. So we had a forecast of 14.2 million, but a budget, so it was budget an amount of 16.9. Could you please sort of, well, I don't know if there's anyone that can maybe explain the difference in there?
So essentially with that, we've so during the maturation of the process, we've had some work has slipped to the following year, but we've actually we've supplemented that with movements within the portfolio there. So you'll see that there's been that slight increase in fleet spend to pick up the gap there. But things like Agnes Water Car Park.
Okay, so that will be road assets, yeah.
There's going to be projects like that. They do slip. We had all good, well intention to complete that by 30th of June. That's now looking like being a 21-22 project. Yeah. So projects like that do slip due to reasons. So what we're saying is that
that will be probably $1 million maybe.
That particular project, I don't have the full list of projects with me right now, but I'm sure we can confer that to you. Yeah, it's just in just keeping up to see if there's anything that is not actually happening in the road space that should be happening. However, it could be that we actually budget a bit more and things came underpriced, or I don't know. It could be a number of different things. It's just that. I guess roads is one of our main jobs that we do around here, so I like to see that spent in a way. Thank you. And I got another, the last question. It's in relation to income, and I think that was up. Other capital revenue. When you note that we received $1.3 million from the Salvation Army for the Phillip Street precinct. Now, so we didn't budget this, or the contributions from the Salvation Army towards Phillip Street, or? We haven't received those yet, though. We haven't, but so we're still working through that. So we didn't forecast or include that in our budget in last year as to monies to be received. There's a timing difference with respect to actually when the relevant capex was included, the revenue associated with that. So that specific contribution is with respect to a specific deliverable as part of the precinct. So part of that related to capital revenue last year, but the large proportion is related to this year, and we're still. So we recognise that those revenue. We're waiting for a receipt of that from the Salvation Army. And I guess my question comes from the side of, so we're treating this contribution as capital revenue. Yes. It's just that I guess it was a grant. It's capital income because it's directly attributable as a contribution to that particular asset. So correct. So if a particular developer wants a particular asset, and as part of that, and they're contributing dollars towards that, we treat that as a capital revenue. If it is a non-specific donation, so if it's just part of what we would call normal headworks or your normal infrastructure charge that you pay, so there's no real defined assets as part of that, it goes in as part of your headworks contribution, so that rather than actually the capital revenue, capital grant component. So so we treating this contribution as capital revenue, so it's a piece of revenue instead of I guess an expenditure, since the building is going to remain a council building. So it's capital revenue because it's a direct, essentially. I was just going back to my understanding of how the relationship is when it comes to the Phillip Street precinct. And also we split, and obviously we split out capital revenue, so we've got a good understanding of what our recurrent operational expenditure and operational revenue is, and those one-off big ticket items, those items that are one-off and attributable to those capital spends, we separate them out separately. So that's why we've got that capital revenue there. So that way it also doesn't distort what our operating revenue position is or our recurrent revenue position is. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Branthwaite.
Thank you, Councillor Goodluck. I had some questions earlier on that were actually answered by other questions that have been presented to you. But I just wanted to sort of mention about congratulations to you and your team for obviously recovering some of the rates that have been outstanding. It's a pretty good success and it's nice to see. Going back to page 5 of your report, which was very comprehensive, thank you. We were talking about a deficit there forecasted of 7.4 million, and now it's come back to a $5.2 million deficit due to a couple of factors, obviously, that were listed there with the Gladstone Water Board and some of the other the works that have been recovered. In my past, we've seen, as we get to the pointy end of the financial year, we start to see that a lot of savings come in that have, as Councillor Muscat had said before, through work and projects that have come in under budget, and we start to realise those savings. Do you sort of see in your crystal ball, do you see any other savings that are going to bring that down to a less than a $5.2 million deficit?
We've challenged every item as part of that to get to that. I'd suggest that the original cut of that forecast was above the figure. So we've worked very hard to bring it back closer to that adopted budget figure. And certainly I'd certainly say there was a lot of, I think, padding on forecast to cover the just in case this occurs.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at what are our actual spends, what are we actually saying in our current, by actual spending patterns, what are we actually saying in those? How are we comparing to previous years, and what are those service levels? You know, because we're essentially padding some of those forecasts.
Yeah,
and we've reviewed those quite well, and I think, and some managers, they're charged with looking after and being custodians of our assets, and I think they're making sure and protecting their ability to respond. And that's to be applauded. But I think as we go through the year, you do get some of those risk factors either don't eventuate, or sometimes they do. And sometimes when they don't eventuate, that's when you get some of the savings.
Because usually there's a bit of fat in some of that budgetary requirements, and when we put in quotes for this and quotes for that, the estimates do come in a lot lower.
And so we've challenged that. I don't expect it to come in much below that 5.2.
All right, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'd wish it would.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's just one of those things that I've seen in the past that does. You do, as you come to the pointy end of the financial year, those savings do start to come out. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Trevor.
Thank you, Councillor Goodluck, Deputy Mayor Goodluck. Mark, we all hate deficits. We delivered a surplus last year. How are we going to get back in the black?
Certainly, it's going to be a big effort to get back in there. So certainly we've got a recovery in income that we need to work through. Our biggest, there has been some minor movements in our OPEX, but not substantial. The vacancy rate is probably the biggest single individual factor in that space. We have taken on some OPEX, additional OPEX with respect to some new assets. But it is recovering our revenue that we need to, our trading areas. And when we did with good reason have a rate freeze, and that has had an impact on the position. So it will be a long haul. We are trying to get back to a minor operating surplus for the next budget, but it is proving difficult looking at some of the work that's being done behind the scenes at the moment. So there's some hard decisions to be made because as we know, a significant amount of our revenue comes from rates. So we'll make sure we can look at taking a longer term picture as trying to recover that operating position if we need to. But certainly I think we would need to make sure that we are recovering costs at CPI or greater. We do have a couple price paths where, particularly in our waste areas and our water areas, where we are below what our costs of running those businesses were. And we were on a price path. Those costs do multiply when we do sustained. So I guess there is some hard decisions to be made from at the elected member level as to whether we continue we're on those price path journeys, which will actually help us recover, or whether we go in a different direction.
And will you remind us and the general public in an open public forum what hard decisions have to be made by this council?
The hard decisions are certainly obviously how you fund. To me, how you fund the deficit and fund your operating services, and that's generally through your general rates, your water rate, and your sewage rates. And we've got that is the big impact, and that's the one that we all see. You know, we're all around this table ratepayers, or we contribute to paying someone's rate bill, whether we're tenants or. So it's that's where it manifests.
Thanks, Councillor Trevor. Mark, just quickly, with the recurrent expenditure, we've got a budget of 193.7 million and the forecast at 220.1 million. I note your commentary around the vacancy rates. Is part of that forecast increase to do with the refinancing?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor. That is the refinancing. So we haven't received response with respect to that yet from the department. So we made application with respect to the refinancing component.
Yep.
So that is So that'll be a one-off hit.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. That's good. And I note including commitments, our capital expenditure is tracking at 82.37%, which is actually above the 74% point at which we are through the financial year. So that, for me, gives me a little bit of confidence. I don't recall us being in that position in recent years, so that's great. There are some areas, such as the road assets, where we've got, not including commitments, about $10 million we've got to spend in the last quarter of the year. So we've got a lot of work to do in that space, but it's pleasing to see that we're tracking the way we're tracking. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions from councillors. Everyone happy? Can I get Councillor Cameron, did you have a question? No?
I've just been sitting on one where it's worth asking, or not really, but it's to do with capital expenditure. And we're tracking this financially, but that doesn't really give you the actual physical position of the project. So we could be anything between 30 and 60 days physically in advance of what these figures show. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yeah. So okay. So obviously this reflects your financial position, and your commitments go a long way to understanding where we are with respect to what's been incurred.
Yeah. So we are possibly in a much better position physically than what that shows. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, can I get a mover for the officer's recommendation? Move Councillor Trevor, seconded Councillor Churchill. All those in favour? That's carried. We'll move on to item number G/3.2, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting, 17th of March. And over to you again, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Attached is the minutes and the items raised as part of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting that was held recently. You'll see there the significant items that were raised during that discussion, particularly with respect to, as we talked about, our operating financial position, but also activity in our contracts and procurement space, our audit and our risk space, as well as some process improvements we made with respect to preparation of our financial statements overall. So happy to take any questions. I'm sure that the two councillors that are members of that committee would be able to assist in that regard also.
Thanks, Mark. Councillor Anson.
Just a question. In the committee minutes, the People, Culture and Safety Quarterly Report, the last paragraph has got a figure of members requested some context regarding the turnover statistics, specifically the 42% resignation. Is that a misfigure, or it seems to be? It's on page 13 of 26. Sorry, in the committee minutes.
Yeah, no, we've got.
It's a. what does that mean, or is it a misfigure?
I think if I may, Councillor Hanson,
Yeah.
there's of the resignations that
Yeah.
occur, the percentage of them that are due to resignation versus other.
That's what it means,
Does
thank
I
you.
believe, just from that quick read. Yeah.
It just seemed an odd figure, that's all, and
Yes.
that's what it means, yeah.
So, yeah, a percentage of a small group, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, the exit interviews and like that we do in that space, that's, it's a reflection of that sense.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henson.
Sorry, Councillor.
You're
go.
up.
You go. Just the procurement thing's part of it. We're still having some problems with the systems and processes. I can remember us having some problems of different types and these types for a long, long time now. So, I think we just need to settle that all out if we can. I know it's difficult. You're dealing with a workforce of, that and a lot of people order bits and pieces around along the traps, and you've got to contain it all. So I know it's very difficult, but we need to see a little bit more improvement, I think, more quickly.
Yeah, so I guess from a executive perspective, we have put resources into actually essentially increasing the priority in our systems that support this activity. So work has been done to prioritise both the contracts and the related procurement to pay module as part of our technology stack. So we are looking at essentially totally flipping the way in which we do our purchasing and track our purchasing. We're hoping that will yield a better result. That's going through a very deliberate process as part of the implementation of that, and we're hopeful that process will be completed by October in terms of having that system fully live. So the contracts module will be a single source of truth, but the procure to pay is the bit that makes the change. So at the moment, very much every invoice that will come through will actually be fed through directly into the system at the point of receival, rather than at the moment it goes through a bit of a journey through our financial system before it comes back and recognised in the system. So we'll be able to pick that up and track that far better. In fact, I would suggest that actually in the first instance may lead to a deterioration of that figure in the first instance, but certainly will lead to greater visibility.
Thank you, but I don't really like the word hopeful. I'd rather a word "we will" rather than "hopefully," but as long as we can stick at it.
We will know that
Thanks.
Absolutely the system will be in place
Thank
to
you.
manage.
I think that will keep track of the overdue invoices too, which is the problem that we were having at the beginning, wasn't it?
I'll probably disagree. It's visibility, to be frank. That's the problem in terms of making sure that our accounts payable team has full visibility of that in terms of the understanding.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Churchill.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Page 17 page 17 of 32, it's pleasing to see that the members congratulated the team on the proactive report, which demonstrate that things appear to be on track. And that's exemplary, and thank Councillor Goodluck, Councillor O'Grady as well, and their representatives and our team. But when someone mentions the word appear to be on track, we didn't expect COVID to come along, and I work and operate in a world of you always expect the unexpected. So I make that comment on the basis of leading to the question in relation to the Queensland Audit Office report, for which I understand that, and we all understand that the Queensland Audit Office is currently preparing a report to Parliament as such on all local governments. And so my question today appropriately, and having read many previous audit reports, it's clear that they like to highlight, or it's important that they highlight some of the challenges that we're currently faced, and going back to this before, is trying to understand or forecast. That's the nature of what you do, Mark, in your capacity as General Managers, try and forecast what is coming around the corner and what do we expect. So my question is twofold. One is, when do we expect that Queensland Audit Office report to be delivered, whether that's delivered to Parliament as such, or to the Gladstone Regional Council, more so our ARIC committee. And I also am led to believe that as part of that, the chair of our audit committee also is invited to, I suppose, the United Chairs gathering at some stage to review the various comparatives of audit reports. So that's my first question. And the second one is that I still believe that the elected members around this table still need to have some robust debate at some stage of our appetite for risk in relation to the future of assets, whether we agree to run to fail, or whether we replace in advance. I mean, I believe that the elected members should be given that opportunity at some stage, and perhaps that could be done as part of the what Councillor Hanson and other councillors have been on about in relation to our asset management, and perhaps we could do that in this budget cycle. So it's a twofold question. Hopefully it's a simple answer.
The simple answer is the QAO report with respect to local governments was tabled last week, so that's public knowledge with respect to that, and as part of that, and as part of tools that the Queensland Audit Office makes available through its website is those comparatives. So we can go in there, we can see how Gladstone region compares with all of all of the councils in Queensland and any particular ones that we want to compare against. So that's there. With respect to risks, we've obviously got a very low risk appetite with respect to delivery of interruption to service. So that will have a flow through with respect to how we fund and propose to fund and look at our asset management plans. So asset management plans will be the ones that actually look at including the strategies with respect to particular types of assets as to whether you run to fail or whether there's different intervention levels that you'll put in place. So they are the important documents that we have that come through to have a look at where do we set those service levels, where do we set those intervention levels, or do we just let particular assets fail and understand the implications to delivery of service? Because essentially assets exist primarily to deliver a service to the community. So there will be a point with respect to funding that.
Okay, and that's part of the budget cycle?
Absolutely.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Any other questions, councillors? Can I get a mover, please? Move Councillor Hanson, second Councillor Branthwaite. All those in favour? That's carried. We move on to item number G/3.3, Complaint Management Policy and Corporate Standard, and back over to yourself, Mark.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So as part of our policy review, we've got before you now our complaints management policy and associated corporate standard. This policy wasn't necessarily due as part of its ordinarily renewal cycle, but has come up due to some changes in our legislative environment, particularly with respect to the Human Rights Act 2019. I'll let Brooke highlight any particular changes. There's no particular amendments or to direction with respect to the policy, but we have gone through a process of just updating the policy with respect to those legislative changes for the Human Rights Act.
As part of the review, we have tried to streamline the document and make it a bit more user-friendly and easier to read and interpret for our staff. So we have reviewed the policy and the actual complaints management process corporate standard. These are both required to be reviewed and decided by a council under the Local Government Act, so that's why they're both presented to you today. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions to the officers, councillors? Everyone's happy with that. Can I get a mover, please?
I'll move the recommendation, Mr Chair.
We'll go Councillor Cameron, beat you to it, Councillor Churchill, but we'll go with moved Councillor Cameron, seconding Councillor Churchill. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item number G/3.4, the review of the drug and alcohol and fitness for work policies. And back over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So this item is with respect to reviewing of several policies that currently exist and exist underneath our workplace health and safety policy. So they're with respect to our drug and alcohol policy and our fitness for work. So these have gone through substantial engagement with all of our employee stakeholders, and we had a long period of consultation across the business with that. So the upshot of that is that we do end up with some revised, what we're proposing to you as corporate standards with respect to these two items. And the general thought within where this sits from an overall policy document perspective is that this really is an operational matter and really probably is best served through being a subservient corporate standard to our workplace health and safety policy that you've already set as council. So the proposal here is to actually essentially repeal the policies you currently have in place in the space and actually make sure that we then outwork that intent through those detailed corporate standards.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions to the officers? Councillor Grady.
Thank you, Councillor Goodluck. I was just wondering, Mark, how often do we run, like, random tests? Is it every day, is it on a daily basis, or how does that work?
Tinus, you online to take that one from a practical perspective?
He's still got his...
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tinus.
Thank you. Just from a practical perspective, we are going through the process now of the selection of a new provider, which we will then agree how our approach to this. You would read in the corporate standard that we refer to random testing. So those principles must be agreed and how we do that. But from a practical point of view, you would have a program of testing across council. Would not necessarily happen on a daily basis, but something that would serve the purpose of the corporate standard to mitigate those risks, but also the ability to direct some testing to, if we believe that there's a need to test at a specific workplace, then we will arrange that testing accordingly. So we still have to outwork the principles of random testing, but it's not every day there will be a test. It is on a program that we will agree with the provider.
Thank you, Tinus.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Hanson. Moved Councillor Hanson, seconding Councillor O'Grady. All those in favour? That's carried. Item number G/3.5, ex gratia arrangements with landowners policy. Sorry, did I say that right?
We'll go with that.
Over to you, Mark.
This item, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is with respect to a policy that we had in place since 2013 regarding a number of ex gratia arrangements we have with landowners across a number of areas. So we've highlighted in the policy where that policy has interactions have occurred with respect to gravel pits, machinery parking, and actually drawing of water from water courses in that may be on different landowners' properties. What we're proposing as part of this review is actually to repeal the policy. We're actually, and the reason being is that really we probably should be going through the appropriate procurement arrangements and putting long-term arrangements in place, which we have. We have in a number of areas, particularly with respect to gravel and the like. We do have a number of arrangements in place with our landholders. So at the time, this was probably it was an area of weakness, but I think over the time we've certainly increased the number of arrangements we have in place, particularly with respect to our gravel. But happy to take any questions.
Councillor Muscat.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. I know you said that you've reviewed the, what's currently happening. Do we have any agreements in place at the moment?
Certainly with respect to gravel, we absolutely do.
We don't have any current agreements, so under this policy, currently.
Yeah. But we actually have individual agreements with landowners. So
what's going to happen to them?
They remain. They're contracts that remain in place with those landowners.
And do they have a renewal date or an end date?
Yeah, generally they each of them are a different arrangement that's been entered into, operationally.
Yeah.
And they all have different. So as part of our contractual reviews, they'll be reviewed.
So when that happens, do we then look at this? Well, the fact that we don't have a policy anymore, or we don't.
So
review?
the individual arrangements Mark's referring to are separate to this policy.
Okay,
they're
good.
above and additional, so they don't get impacted at all. What we're saying is this policy is actually not required anymore because we enter into separate arrangements when we need to.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, even if it was required, I don't think it's, as you said, it doesn't really go with the values of the business. So if someone was to just bring this policy up, we can do this. Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't have this type of situations happening. Thank you.
Councillor Churchill.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Exemplary, and it's pleasing to know that you're actually having individual formal agreements with the relevant landholders. Mind you, tongue-in-cheek comment, it'd be lovely if we could sort out something about footpaths eventually too, in relation to who owns the footpaths. But anyway, that's another matter. If I just ask a question in relation to your research and your officers doing this research, are we going to be delivering something that's Gladstone region relevant, or are we taking whatever your iterations may be? Will we be looking at it, local government industry wide, rather than perhaps doing our own thing? Is it a CQ ROC agenda item? Is it an LGAQ agenda item? In trying to just understand if there's any policy delivered in relation to landowners policy and ex gratia arrangements, just trying to make sure we're all on the same page, that was all.
I guess certainly there is a role to play, because obviously the support of road making activities is an activity for all local governments. So there is obviously a role, I think, for those other peak bodies, be them CQ ROC, be them at LJQ, to provide some guidance and direction in that space. At the moment, we have been working through individually with respect to that. I don't think anything that we've entered into would be counter what would come from those peak body type discussions. But certainly would welcome and would think that there would be, make sure that we leverage any work that's done at those levels.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Before I go to Councillor Cameron, I understand the intent of repealing the policy with respect to gravel pits and drawing of water. We don't have any arrangements in place, particularly with parking of plant in the road reserve. How do we manage that with landholders in place of this? Do we have management practices, other mechanisms that we use in that respect, if we obviously have none of these ex gratia arrangements in place?
Probably not one for me, to be honest. I probably would hand over to Rick to see whether we do. I don't believe we actually have any formal arrangements in place with respect to that.
I guess if I could, like, the road reserve is council's property.
Yeah, we
It's
do
only
already
when
have a
we're
road
parking
reserve.
on private landowners'
Yeah.
property. Obviously there are, we need to be considerate of how we're doing that, but I think that might be the issue, rather than parking within private property boundaries, where we'll use the road reserve, which is accessible under current arrangements. There's no special arrangements required. Is that?
So that's specifically for when we're doing work in an area and we park our plant and equipment on and around landholders' property. Is that?
That's my understanding. I'm just looking at who's sitting behind
so
you.
if we would put, so if we were working those places, we would generally, look at utilising the public space that is available to us. So we, obviously within the road reserve, we have generally rights, depending on the road reserve, to either maintenance rights, or we're generally, performing maintenance on behalf of someone in that space. So we've got the right to plan that space.
Yeah. So we've obviously been doing that since Bob was a boy, and we use other mechanisms to manage that other than this policy. Yeah, that's correct. That's good. Thank you. Councillor Cameron, did you have a question?
Oh, just a quick question. I see that the land owners are paid a consideration as a royalty.
It's generally under the gravel arrangements, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So is there another royalty paid to the state government?
Yes, as part of that.
Who pays that?
We've got to pay pay that.
So that's a separate thing. Okay. Is there any particular reason why it's referred to as a royalty?
That's essentially just what the term has been for that sort of payment, in terms of the the winning of so-called winning of gravel from the land,
Okay.
so to speak. But yeah, that's just the term that's been applied to it.
That's
And
fine, that's all I had.
in fact, all mining activity is generally that sort of space.
They do attract royalties, yes.
Royalties.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions? No further questions. Can we have a mover, please? Moved Councillor Muscat, seconded Councillor O'Grady. All those in favour? That's carried. We move on to item number G/3.6, 143-21, Gladstone Water Mains Renewal, and I welcome Acting General Manager for Operations, Rick Mulvey. And Christy Walkner, sorry, Manager Contracts and Procurement. Welcome.
Thank you very much for that, Mr Deputy Mayor, and good morning, everybody. Report being presented today is requesting to enter into a contract with NTS Group Proprietary Limited to complete mains water renewal works within the region. Council went to tender via the LG tender box February 21 with 4 responses received. After evaluation of those responses against set criteria, it was found that NTS Group was the achieved preferred contractor status by providing the best overall value for council. The timing around that, where if successful, we'd like to commence around June 21 and with a finalisation around May 22. Any questions in regard to that?
Questions to the Acting General Manager? Councillor Muscat?
I was just wondering, because there's a couple of questions I want to ask about the confidential attachment.
Not permitted to ask questions about confidential attachments in council meeting, and we can't go into closed for that reason. So those questions can be asked outside of and prior to the meeting, but we can't go into confidential at the moment.
Please ask you, was the estimate of the work a confidential piece, or was it, because I can't find it in the report?
It's in the confidential report.
Yeah, but it's not in here, so I'm assuming I can't ask a question about that then. Okay.
Christy may want to respond. If information that's not provided in the report that's provided for your general meeting today, then you wouldn't be able to ask questions about that because it's been provided confidentially.
Okay.
Any further questions, councillors? Can we have a mover? You happy to move the officer's recommendation, Councillor Cameron? Yep, moved Councillor Cameron, seconded Councillor Branthwaite. All those in favour? Declare it carried. We move on to deputations. I understand we don't have any deputations, so we'll move on to councillors' reports. Do we have any councillors' reports? Councillor Churchill?
Well, no, unless you're encouraging one, but no, I don't have one. But I perhaps, and you may already be preparing for this in summing up in your role as deputy and acting chair in relation to the Anzac Day ceremonies for this Sunday for council's commitment to that annually. I'm sure you'd be prepared for that. And schools and everybody else.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Councillor Branthwaite?
I'd just like to chip in to say that the next 2 weekends we have fishing is a major thing that's happening around this community. It's the Tannum Crab Classic is on this weekend, and also we're leading into the Boyne Tannum Hookup the following weekend with over $350,000 worth of prizes, and people around the region. It's certainly look as though the weather could shape up pretty good for that weekend. So our $100,000 barra last weekend did not go off at Lake Awonga, so it's still swimming around out there, but it's not worth $100,000 anymore. But anyhow, it's a great time of the year to be in the Gladstone region, especially for the fishing experience.
Thank you, Councillor Branthwaite. And I did speak to the Mayor this morning, who did ask me to raise a couple of things in his absence, but obviously we do have Anzac Day across the region. We'll have services at Gladstone, Boyne Tannum, Calliope, Mount Larkham, Agnes Water, Rosedale, Miriam Vale, Baroran, Turkey Beach, Yubobo and Southend. So make sure you look up where and when you can attend those services. We also have Labor Day on the 3rd of May 2021. We'll have trade unionists and workers gathering from across the region down at the marina in Gladstone and celebrating the work of the labour movement over many generations, as they do each and every year. And I understand that was cancelled last year for the first time in over 100 years due to COVID, as many other things were. So they'll be down there this Labor Day again this year. As Councillor Branthwaite mentioned, we've got the Boyne-Tannum hookup on the 30th of April, and my understanding is that you've got 9 days, 21 hours, 3 minutes and 49 seconds until that event kicks off, as per their website. So make sure that kicks off on the 30th of April through to the Sunday. Make sure you head down there and support the Boyne-Tannum hookup. We've got the Crab Classic this weekend, and I'd also like to give a special mention to the Walking for Warriors Endurance Challenge, which has been set up by a local group here this year. I understand it's the first time it's happened. A whole bunch of people will be walking for Warriors, as it states, raising money for Young Veterans Australia. They're on track to achieve $20,000 in funds. You can buy tickets in their raffles and support them out at the Boyne Island Woolworths there, where they've got some really great prizes. One of which is a custom-made, handcrafted table that was made right here in the Gladstone region with the support of local business. And I know there's a number of our RSLs across the region are looking to jump in there and get their own items made as well. So these will be raising money for Young Veterans Australia. As I said, all proceeds will go to Central Queensland. There's over 200 participants, and we've actually got, as a locally organised event, we've got participants that are participating in Adelaide, the Gold Coast, and even across the ditch in New Zealand, all wearing the same shirts that was born out of an idea that was born right here in the Gladstone region by some very dedicated people. And it's all about raising money and awareness for our veterans. And these people, it's a 24-hour run, it'll be kicking off on the 24th in the day leading up to Anzac Day. And there will be a 6-hour run, a 12-hour run, and a 24-hour run. And I've spoken to a couple of the organisers that are doing the 24-hour run, and the idea for them is it's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to be a very challenging time, and they're looking to do that to support our veterans and push themselves to their limits in honour of our vets, and make sure that it's doing the right thing for them. So a great cause. Make sure you stop down there and show plenty of encouragement on Saturday, and head out to our local Anzac Day services at dawn and morning services across the region on Sunday. With nothing else, we'll move on to, there's no other councillor reports from anyone else, no? We'll move on to urgent business. There's no urgent business. We've got no notices of motions, and we don't have any confidential items today. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and have a great rest of the week. We'll declare the meeting closed.